Ender Lilies is a bloody fantastic game. As I said before, it is a Dark Souls, what is it? Souls-like, that's what we call them. Souls-like Metroidvania, which is a lot of buzzwords. Souls-like 2D Metroidvania. And it looks gorgeous. Now, the thing I like about Ender Lilies is you never feel like... I think a good way to put it is you never feel like the bosses are unfair. All of the bosses have an attack pattern that you can maybe not always easily work out. Oh my god, that area looks awesome. I'm excited to go there. Maybe not always easily work out, but there's always a pattern there that can be discovered. And there's no like bullshit like, oh, you've discovered the pattern. Well, now I'm gonna like change up what I'm doing. Go fuck yourself, basically. Like in the case of Birth by Sleep, where the secret boss in that one actually does seemingly randomly change the attack pattern. I think there might be some logic to it, but it looks random, that's for sure. Anyway, not the point. Ender Lilies, for example, okay, here's one good example. There is a boss called the Dark Witch Elaine. Getting through her first stage fairly easy. She doesn't do anything that dangerous. Second stage, she turns into like more of a monster, and she has this spike ability that when you first do the fight, it seems like when she uses it is completely random, but it's very, very predictable when she uses it. It's just that the window to actually dodge is very tiny. So she'll do her main cast ability, then you can get 2 hits in on her. 2 hits in on her. Then she will like fly around a bit and come back to you and try to like stab you with the claws. Now, when she stabs you with the claws, there's actually a point in there where if you're using the default weapon or the default spirit, you can get 1 hit in there. Now, if you try to get a second hit in there, 100% of the time, you will take damage. There is no way you can get around that. So basically the game is telling you, stop being greedy and get your hit in there and get out. And once you realize that, you realize that the bosses are actually, they're not the hardest bosses out there. Like, most of the bosses in Ender Lilies, so far, I've only died on maybe, like, twice. If you compare that to, like, an actual Souls game, like Dark Souls, for example, the first one. That game, I think the only boss I didn't die on the first time I fought them was the Asylum Demon. And that's only because I knew how to fight the Asylum Demon. You can just, like... I think if you just hug his crotch, you just can dodge a lot of the attacks. Actually, that's the case with a lot of... Sorry, no, that's the Taurus Demon. Asylum Demon, if you just circle around him, you can dodge most of the attacks. Anyway, we're not talking about Dark Souls right now. So it's not as hard as Dark Souls. Absolutely not. But it feels rewarding to do the fight because it feels like you're learning how the enemies actually work. And one of the interesting things about the way it does its boss fights is rather than you go through an area and then it introduces some new enemy, Capra Demon, Taurus Demon, other Dark Souls bosses, Sif. Instead of doing it where the boss enemy is very different to the regular enemies you fight, instead what it does is, at least for most of them, with the exception of Siegfried, the first boss, basically the enemies you fight up until the boss are sort of like a miniature version of the boss. So a lot of the attacks the boss has will be replicated in the enemies, not to the same extent, because that would make it too easy. You get very used to the boss before the boss even happens. But Dark Witch Elaine is a great example of this. So all of the attacks that Dark Witch Elaine has, the regular enemies you fight before that always have like a miniature version of it. So there, for example, there's an enemy that shoots out like these magic spheres at you. There's an enemy that spawns spikes. There's an enemy that spawns this tornado, which is effectively the same as her magic tornado wall. And you sort of get a bit of an understanding of what the boss might do. You just don't have an understanding of the extent. I think this is actually a really interesting way to handle boss design, because it allows you to make the boss. It allows you to make the boss harder because you don't have to train the player as their. So it allows you to make the boss harder because you are training the player. So if you were like thrown straight into like one of these bosses, you would die instantly. Like you would have no idea what's going on. But because you sort of have this training up until the boss, it gives you a sort of an idea. But the other thing, okay, the other reason why the bosses in, even though they are quite difficult bosses in that way, the other thing that makes them easy, I know I'm saying they're difficult and they're easy. It's a weird, I don't know how to properly explain it. You have to play Ender Lilies. Please just play Ender Lilies. It's a very, very good game. The thing that makes the bosses easier, though, is that unlike a Souls game, every single boss has a checkpoint just before the boss. So this would be like having a bonfire right outside the fog wall. So every single time you die, you get full Estus. That makes it obviously a bit easier in that respect, because in Souls games, you can, like, say you're going to like the Capra Demon, for example. Every time you die to the Capra Demon, you have to go run back through the lower and Undead Berg, and you have to fight everything along the way, unless you like skip past them and get through the fog wall without dying. Unless you do that, you have to fight the enemies as you go back, and this requires you to get better at the game. Otherwise, you get to the boss and have one heal and fuck it up anyway. So, while I think Ender Lilies could be a harder game, I think that as it is, it's as difficult as it needs to be. Sure, I would appreciate the game actually being more difficult, maybe making the bosses have more variety in their attacks rather than having... Usually they have like 4 or 5 attacks they will cycle through, and you just have to work out the cycle and how to dodge them. Sure, the bosses could absolutely be more difficult, but it's difficult enough to get the point across. And I think that's really all that matters. The other thing that I really like about Ender Lilies is the soundtrack. So this soundtrack is fucking phenomenal, and there's a reason why it's phenomenal. It's because the person who made it is probably my favorite musician. So I don't think I've ever talked about Millie on the podcast, but Millie has some absolutely amazing music. I highly recommend checking out her channel. Gorgeous music, very good stuff. Please go watch Millie's stuff. And she did the entire soundtrack for Ender Lilies, obviously with other people as well, but she composed the entire soundtrack. And yes, it's very good, because her normal style basically fits with Ender Lilies anyway. She did the opening theme to Goblin Slayer, for example. So if you take Goblin Slayer and make it more orchestral, make it less hype. Yeah, I guess that's a good way to take it. It's very, very orchestral music. There's occasionally some humming. It honestly fits the theme of Ender Lilies basically perfectly, because as you can probably tell from the screenshots, like a Souls game, it's very grey, it's very bleak. Basically the only color you get, with the exception of some of the areas that I do have some nice lighting in the background, like with these purple, I think they're purple candles. Most of the color in the game comes from the enemies doing an attack. So it's like, oh yeah, this dude, he will smack his hammer on the ground, and there'll be like a wave of orange that comes out. I think this makes the attacks sort of, one, they stand out. So a lot of games have a problem, even in like 2D side-scrollers like this, where the attacks very much blend into like the rest of the surroundings. This is one of the things that I will criticize games like Dead Cells and Hades for, even though I adore both of them. Even though I adore both those games, occasionally I get sort of visually overloaded and lose track of where the attacks actually are compared to the background. But when your background is just fucking gray and brown, and then your attacks are these like massive orange things, it makes it much clearer sort of what's actually going on. The art's also just really nice. Like, the art's just genuinely really nice. The art and the music both complement each other. I love sort of everything about this game. Oh, there's an area that has green butterflies. That's cool. Way later than I am, I guess. But yeah, most of it sort of looks like this, where it's like, yes, do you like grey? Good. Just good. But you're not supposed to like this world, because it's the same. Honestly, it's basically if you take the Dark Souls world and you just make the character like a lolly. That's pretty much what we have going on here. A lolly that has stand powers. That's basically this game. So you're not supposed to like the world. The world is like taken over by like zombie sort of things. I think, what do they call them? What is the word? So the description: unravel the mystery of the kingdom destroyed by the reign of death. Yeah, it's not supposed to be a nice world. The enemies are called the Blighted, which certainly isn't reminiscent of another game at all. Definitely not. No.